Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leo. I'm the CEO and founder of Leo Lee Educations. And in our very podcast today, we'd like to introduce with you Miss Liz Chen. She's one of the very well-known registered migration agents that I work very closely with. And hopefully after today, we will clarify a lot of your questions and your doubts about
Mm,
ICT, whether it's a good place to go to, and if it is, well, what should you do to get your high chances of the PR there? So first of all,
mm.
thank you for joining us today, Elise. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. Glad to be on
Thank you.
board.
Yeah. Lisa, just before we start, can you just give us a bit of an introduction about your company and yourself so that our audience can have a better understanding?
Yeah, so my name is Liz Chen and I'm Chinese background, but I grew up in Canberra and I came here when I was 5. So I started my migration business back in 2015 as a sole trader, and that was coming out of 8 years in the public service as an accounting and finance consultant. So I worked with approximately 10 different government departments, so Department of Home Affairs included, but in the asset space, not necessarily in immigration. So Department of Home Affairs, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, a number of the high-end departments, but I won't list them just to bore you. But
Mm.
the background is that I have experience in the bureaucracy and the paperwork, and I understand how slow a department can be. So I've worked across agencies that are from 700 people to about 3,000 people. And so noting that the Department of Home Affairs right now has restructured as of November 2018. Now they're quite big because they include Border Force. And so this has an ongoing impact with all types of visa applications. So it's imperative that either the agent that represents you or the documents that you read yourself, you actually meet all the eligibility criteria, and triple check it, because if it gets to a case officer and they don't like it for whatever reason, then it pushes your entire plan backwards, right? And then what I'm seeing a lot lately is there's a lot of student visa refusals or people applying for protection visas just to stay on board. And that's not what I'd like to advise. And so I guess today's session is more about understanding what Canberra can do for you in terms of permanent residency, and or coming over here for working, to get regional sponsorship, or even to study, right?
Gotcha. Sure.
Mm.
Can you tell me more about a bit more about what visas do you specialize in? What types of visa do you do?
Yeah, so my background is accounting finance, so I actually specialize in business migration. So the bulk of my clients actually are in the 132A and B space, so significant business talent, as well as the 188 space, which is business innovation and entrepreneur. But given that I'm based in Canberra, the other, like I would say probably 30% of my work relates to ACT nomination and advice on students trying to get permanent residency after they graduate from ANU, UC, any other colleges in Canberra as well. And now I'm getting a ton of queries because Canberra's going to be technically regional with the new changes, right? Mm.
Yes. Great. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. So yeah, let's just go dive into the questions that a lot of my clients have. Is the first one
Sure.
is um, with the new visa coming up, and it seems like regional area is going to be a very appealing destination for many of them, and ICT is definitely be one of them. A lot of them
Mm.
ask me question like, what courses should they do if they want to start in ICT that can have a better chance of a permanent residency for them.
Mm. So, as you may or may not know, in terms of permanent residency, it's dependent on an occupation list, right? So, the
Right.
occupation list changes every year because it's done by the Department of Education in conjunction with a bunch of private enterprises. So, really, the answer to that question is, what job do you think will stick around after you graduate? Right. So, if you study a course that's 1 year, is it likely to stick around and that job's still around in a year's time? If you're doing a bachelor, so when I meant 1 year, that was probably a diploma. If you do a master's after 2 years, will that job be around? And if you're studying for 3 years, like a bachelor, will that job be around? So for example, a lot of the clients used to study accounting, but after the 3 year studies, it's all making it a little bit difficult, right? So currently, based on my projection, the jobs that will stay over the next 2 to 3 year period is in construction. So a
Yeah.
lot of the labor work, metal fabricators, carpentry, especially in Canberra, we're seeing a lot of buildings going up in the next, actually probably 12 to 18 months, because they're trying to increase the population from its current state of 420,000 to about 500 over the next, I think by 2020. So, no, by 2030, because 2020 is next year. So given the population growth, then that'll also stimulate the infrastructure. So in terms of infrastructure, you'll need people to build stuff. So anything to do with construction management, building, that I foresee is one sector. The other sector is in nursing and medical. So there's going to be a brand new medical facility that's going to be built soon. And so same with the University of Canberra, they have a direct line into the hospital. So that's two. And then the third one that I foresee is more aged care / childcare. So these jobs, regardless of what you study, is most likely going to be around in the next 2 or 3 years.
I gotcha. Yeah. Like you said, a lot of people, they do, especially for Asian students, a lot of them, they do accounting, fortunately.
Yes.
And they do realize later on that it's very difficult for them because the competition is not.
One, it's difficult, and two, because you're competing against every other Asians are the most popular race, right? So you're competing against a lot of other people who will have probably better English, or if not, better financially supported from their parents. So it's a little hard, right? So I would choose an occupation to study in that is a little less, how would I say, probably significant or white collar. But if you actually go down into a blue collar field, like the construction work or the service industry, you're likely to get a job, which will actually help with the permanent residence. And if you think about it, employees or personnel costs, like salaries, are the most expensive in Australia, right? Our minimum wage is, I think, $18, $19 at the moment. So regardless of any job, you're going to be making that. So even if you were in an accounting job, you might not even be making the same as if you were working a construction job. So it depends what their long-term plan is, right? Is it to support a family, or is it just to get a degree? Because if you get a degree, that's fine. You can go to any university, but may not necessarily mean a job is out there for you.
Gotcha. Sure. And so on the next question that I want to ask is that because I think in November, the way they define the regional areas will be a lot different, right? I think they changed the definition. It's apparently it's any city, but Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and Gold Coast. The rest are considered regional area.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they're going to be releasing the postcodes probably on the 16th of November. I saw a newsletter out on the Department of Home Affairs, which I can share on this if you want me to share. Now I'll find the link while we talk about it. So they're going to be releasing probably the new postcodes, but given that most people know it's none of the major capital cities, Canberra will probably be a hotspot. And to be honest, it's very close to Sydney. It's only a couple of hours. It's probably better than living in Cabramatta or something, 2 hours south from Sydney, because you can still get permanent residency. But the actual definition of those postcodes will, we won't find out until 16th of November.
Yes.
I'll just find the link for you. Yeah.
Sure. And just while you're searching for that, I just want to know, and I understand it's a very general question, but can you give us about top 5 or top 3 reasons why people should consider starting in ACT, or what are some top reasons?
Yeah. So top 3 reasons, we have a very small population. So there's only 400,000 people at the moment, which also means the average income here is 75,000 or above, which is higher than every other state in the city, in Australia. So secondly, you're competing against less competition. So finding a job will be much easier, even in the hospitality industry. So we'll touch on the Canberra Matrix soon, but in the Canberra Matrix, it asks you to have a job in the ACT. Right now, we've got one of the lowest unemployment rates. So I think around 1.9%, 2%, which is very low considering, but I'll double check that number, but it's lower than the other cities. Now so 1, obviously low population. 2, you've got less competition. 3, the environment in Canberra is very, very easy to get around. There's barely any traffic. You're not stuck in traffic for an hour, except now, well, it depends where you live, right? But most likely you'll be able to, via public transport, get to places in about half an hour. If you drive, it's even easier. Parking's cheap.
Okay.
Getting around is cheap. So that's 3. So 1, 2, 3. And then 4, it's really good to create a family. So if you're looking at getting permanent residency because you've got to support your family, like you've got a wife, a husband, and kids, then the education system here is also very good. And because of the short distance in traveling, you know, let's say your kids get sick, then you're only 20, 30 minutes away from the nearest hospital, right? Whereas in Sydney, you might be stuck in traffic. In Melbourne, you probably do the same thing. So here it's very convenient for that family environment. Not so good for singles. That's what I hear. People get bored. But top 3 to 4 would be family, location, population, and job.
Great. Yeah, because the people who follow our companies, there's a lot of them who have already have family, already got kids, and they came here at a pretty much mature age. So many of them they do struggle with you know, either to find a good education for their kids and a good place, not just for themselves but for their family as well. So probably ACT is a good place to be.
Correct. I mean, currently, I'll just add to that point. Currently, the housing is probably considered a little expensive, if not to buy or to rent. But over the next 12 to 18 months, you'll see for anyone who travels to Canberra that there's an influx of apartments being built, right? So in terms of accommodation, they'll always be able to find one over the next 12 to 18 months, right? So if they plan for that, then the likelihood of the rent and the cost of accommodation will reduce and start to come down. And then as a result of building more apartments, then there'll be more jobs created, then there'll be more people here. So it's kind of like a cycle, and that's what the aim of the government is trying to do. Can I just share my screen? I found a link
Go for it. Yeah. Try it.
To ACT skills, to the skilled newsletter. So this is the Department of Home Affairs website, and they release newsletters for skilled migration. So they're meant to be monthly, but it seems to be quarterly because the last one's September. And this one, they introduced the new skilled regional visas, which is what we're talking about. The 491 will be replaced with, the 491 will replace the 489, and then the 494 will replace the 187. Okay, and so the benefits of the visa, so apparently they're going to be priority processing regional applications. So in theory, it should be quicker, right? Anyone that applies. Now there is an income threshold, so the employer has to pay a minimum of $53,900, which equates to about $25, $26 an hour. And that
could be a big pain for a lot of a big concern for a lot of people as well who's planning to apply for 491. You know, that income, which is we're going to talk about that later on. Yeah, because it's a big concern.
Yeah. I mean, the income, it's a twofold, right? The one, do you have an employer that's willing to pay? And 2, you probably need that to survive here anyway, right? Because it's not cheap to live in Canberra. You have to weigh up is the, and so we'll talk about that. So this list, I mean, keep an eye out on this department's website because they'll probably list out the actual regional postcodes after November. Okay, so I'll stop share and then we can, and then I'll send you the link so you can have that.
Sure.
And your next question?
Yeah, so the next one is this ICT Matrix that we did talk about.
Yes.
It's a bit confusing for many people. And my understanding is ICT has their own ways to calculate the points, and it's a bit different from other states. So can you tell us, just briefly tell us about what it means what is included in the metric?
Yeah, so I'll share my screen again because this is what I normally share with my clients during a consultation. So I let them, so this is my internal website and we use a bunch of different stuff here, but I created a one-pager overview. Okay, so the one-pager overview is, it helps clients digest the information because it's so complicated, right? There's a realm of visas and laws and policy. So we have a one-pager. Can you see the screen? Just double checking.
Yeah.
Okay. So the way it works is on the right-hand side is the PR options, and this is usually most people's goals. Okay, so on the right-hand side, there are only 3 options to get PR through skilled. Currently, after November, I will update this with the new changes, but we'll just talk about the current situation. So the first is 189, which is a self-sponsored. As we all know, you need skills assessment, and right now the expression of interest points, you need like 80 points or above. Counting right now is like 85, 90 plus plus.
Yeah.
So at a bare minimum, in terms of your English, you're going to need at least 7 or more. Okay, so that's one. The second one, which is what we're talking about, the ACT nomination or the ACT Matrix. So 190 is available for any state or territory government. The qualifications for that is you still need a skills assessment in your occupation, but the expression of interest points is a lot lower. So you need 65 points overall. Okay, what that means is you probably could get away with an English of 6 or more, but noting different occupations, so counting, you'll still need 7 to get your skills assessment. And then that's the government sponsored one. And then the third one is an employer sponsored pathway, which in its current form, one is regional, one is non-regional. So the regional one means you just have to have 3 years of experience, you get sponsored by an employer, you have English of 6 or more, and then you'll be able to apply for a 187. Now that, as you know, is going to be stopped as of November.
Yep.
So that'll get replaced with the 494. So then when I redo this map, the 494 will go back on the temporary residence side. So just focusing on number 2, which is on this side, the 190. So in theory, you need 65 points overall. What that means is you only need to get 60 points first. Make sure you tick it off. So let's say your age, then your English, then your bachelor's, and then maybe a professional year. And that gets your 60 points, okay? And then after November, if you're single, you get the extra 10 points. If you got your spouse, they do the English. So as long as you have your 60 points, then the 5 points is the matrix. And this is what a lot of people get confused about. They're like, oh, I've got this on this matrix and this. So, well, first of all, check that you've got 60 points first. You've got your skills assessment, then come talk to me about a matrix. So assuming that you have 1 and 2, got your skills assessment, got your 60 points, then let's talk about the matrix. So the matrix itself is just to give you that 5 points, right? So this is my internal website, but we've got an occupation list and then we have a nomination and guideline. So what the matrix is, why it's confusing is people keep talking about points. The matrix at the moment, based on the government website, is inviting anyone that has 70 points or more.
Yes.
Okay, and then if you had submitted a matrix before, you could get away with 65 points. So the criteria or the key for your clients or anyone that's listening is to go through the guidelines, because it's actually written very, very well. Now, let me find the guidelines back for you. The guidelines is actually written by the manager of ACT Business Migration, Skills Migration. So her name is Julianne O'Brien. She is also in herself a registered migration agent. Okay, so that's why this guideline is very, very specific and also very, very clear on what she will and will not accept, right? So if you go through the guideline, you read through every single detail. That's why there's, I don't know how many pages there's, 30 pages. It's detailed for a reason, because she says, if you're capable of coming to Canberra and reading and have English of 6 or more, then read through the guideline, right? That's usually the first question. So yes, going through this point, what I probably highlight to people is probably page 3. Make sure you read this if you're a Canberra resident. Okay, so this says you can nominate any occupation in the ACT occupation list. What does that mean? That means you jump on their site and you have a look at the occupation list. So this occupation list is as at 1 July 2019. Okay, so keep an eye out on this date, because if and when it changes, you want to find the latest occupation list. Because
How often do they change it? How often do they update this list?
So last year it probably changed 2 to 3 times. This year, as you can see, it hasn't changed for 3 months yet. But it may likely change, I would say, if not once or twice in a financial year. Okay, and the reason that is once they run out of nomination spaces or an occupation is getting, like channeled in, then they'll change the list. So keep an eye on the effective date, which means always go back to the ACT website as opposed to any one of your agent's websites, because the best bet is you know, if the ACT website is wrong, then you can at least argue that. So what this means is, even though there's a status of open and closed,
Yes.
right, open or closed, you can nominate any one of these occupations. Okay, so if you're a farmer or finance manager, or what's the one that's closed? Accountant. If you're an
Accountant is
accountant,
closed, yeah.
accountant is closed, but it doesn't mean you cannot apply.
Mm.
Okay, so that's the criteria. So that's the key. You can still apply because it's any one of this occupation.
Mm.
Okay, the open and closed just dictates two things. One, do you get points for it? And two, if you're going to get employer sponsored for 187 or regional certifying body, will they accept it, right? There's another criteria. So what that means is, if you go back to the 190 guidelines, it says you can nominate any occupation on the ACT list, even if that occupation is closed. Okay,
Yeah.
and only open occupations will score points, which is what I said. You'll either get points or you won't get points. Now, some open occupations have a caveat, which means, okay, what does that mean? Let's say people study IT. Okay, so I know for a
Geez,
fact.
a lot of my clients have IT background, really. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
them.
awesome. So if they study IT, okay, so let's say, sorry, an ICT business analyst.
Yeah.
Okay, they've got a skills assessment ICT business analyst, but there's two little asterisks here. Okay, what does that mean? You kind of got to then scroll down to the bottom of the page and look at it. Now, this employment caveat says, in order for you to apply for the matrix, you need at least 1 year of employment in ACT. Okay, and it also needs to be a medium to large enterprise, around 50 employees, or an academic appointed at an ACT tertiary. Okay, so this does make it a little challenging for those who are who have little asterisks on the side. Okay. Now, you know, these little ones, which is the happy hats, you know, they look like eyes to me sometimes. That just says you need registration or licensing. So you may need to actually have studied something in that particular field. So on the first question you asked me, what kind of jobs, occupations do you think will stay around? Well,
Yeah.
100% construction, right? Why? Look at it. Panel beater, bricklayer, stonemason, painting, plasterer, plumber, aircon, drainer, gas fitter, roof plumber, electrician, okay, lift mechanic. So these occupations is likely you need a registration licensing, which means you need to study it, which means you need
Just
to have
before you continue,
had.
actually, you raise a very good point. Like, a lot of them, they understand that it's good for them to study those sort of trade courses like plumbing, building, construction. But in terms of getting the student visa, it seems the most challenging part for, especially for my clients from Vietnamese background, is to get this student visa.
Yeah, English.
Yes, very tough, you know, to get this sort of visa for this course. What would you
Yeah.
suggest them to do then if this?
To get the student visa for this course, it's tough. Is it because of the genuine intentions or because of their English ability?
I think more of the genuine intention is a bit tough to explain it to the immigrations. Yeah, it's a bit hard, and that's why we usually send them to higher educations rather than trade. Even though we understand that it's good better for them to do trade course. That is the
100% agree. Yeah, I guess that you're right in terms of probably GT. They probably think because you've got the trade, then you have the skill to work in it, and then you don't. So that'll also depend on probably the length of time these courses are for. So an alternative suggestion to that, let's go back to my one-pager overview, right? So let's go back onto the, I think on your screen, it's the left-hand side, with temporary residents. So I've just done this so it's easier for people. Most people are on a student visa.
Yeah.
Then if they're bachelor or above, they get a graduate visa. Okay. And then my advice to them is, if they're on a graduate visa, then they work really damn hard to try and get a skills assessment to go across to the other side of the page and then get their points in the English and everything. But if they cannot, the only options currently is they keep going down onto a training visa, all right, or a working visa. So if the construction trade work from Vietnamese background is not able to get a student visa, then we may be able to bring them across on a training visa, right? Because a training visa's intent is that they will train somebody to work with an employer to upskill them.
Yep.
And also in this one, they only need IELTS of 4.5.
Gotcha.
Okay, so it's one of the lower minimum. Whereas a student visa, you need IELTS of 5.5, or you package it with an early course. But if you package it with an early course, they need to have, you know, reasons why you want to come study and do a particular course, right? So that would be probably my only suggestion of if they cannot get past that GT requirement for a student, then and they have experience overseas, they could probably come down onto a training visa. But we can explore that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Just going back onto the 190, right? So occupation list, keep an eye on this list. Now let's go back to the eligibility criteria. Now you must be living and working in Canberra for 3 months immediately before the date of the matrix submission. What this means is that they want you to demonstrate that you actually live and work in Canberra, you like it, B, you're stimulating the economy, and C, that you are likely to stay in Canberra. Because people who have never been to Canberra probably have a misconception of it, right? They think it's government, they think it's boring, they think, why would you go there? So they want you to be here and at least experience it for 3 months before you apply.
Yeah.
However, if you only live here for 3 months, you do not get any points.
Oh, okay. So,
okay, so yes, you meet one eligibility, but are you going to have enough points for them to invite you is another story. Okay, and so we'll keep going on the guidelines, right? So you must be living and working in Canberra. So the employment does not have to be full-time, but has to be continuous. So you need 3 months of continuous payment into your bank account, 3 months of continuous payroll.
yeah.
Right, pay slips. Okay, and then here, third dot point, you can work for more than one employer to get to that 20 hours a week. Right, let's say you work casually, so one employer can only offer you 5 to 8 hours a week. You need another job to get you that 12 to 15 hours. Okay, now the other thing to note is Canberra itself, or ACT, is surrounded by other suburbs such as Queanbeyan, Jerrabomberra, Googong. They are in New South Wales. So this is where you've got to be mindful, or people who are moving, because the rent down in those areas are cheaper, but it does not necessarily mean you could get ACT nomination as well. Okay, something to keep in mind. So yeah, you must demonstrate that your work activity is in the ACT. Now, when we scroll down to the points, I'll show you that if you live within a 30-minute commute, you will be eligible as a Canberra resident. But just anyone who's planning to move into Canberra first, right, explore the area, use your map. You know, the best way is go into Google, go into Maps, type in Canberra. Sorry, I've just got to charge my battery. Okay, so we go into, oh, are you with me? Just checking.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we go into ACT, so if you want to go ACT.
I can't hear you, Liz. Hello?
1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back. And my... Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Good now.
Awesome. Okay, sorry, I just had to charge my phone in and then it switched cameras because I've got 2 cameras going on in the office. So in ACT, what I want to share with people, there's a border around here, right? So that is ACT, Australian Capital Territory, and then anything outside that is still considered New South Wales. Okay, so you could still live 30 minutes out and then come back. All right, so going back onto so that's that dot point. Now, this is also another point that people seem to miss out on. So if you're nominating an occupation that's in group 1 or group 2, you must have proficient or superior English. That means you must have IELTS of 7 or more, or PT 65 or more in this occupation. Now, they don't give you a list of the major occupations, group 1 or group 2. So what I tell clients is you literally open a new tab on your screen, you type in the occupation. So give me an occupation that you want to know. Let's say
just accountant, for example. Yeah, just accountant, very basic.
for accountant. Okay.
Yeah.
So the accountant general, I literally type in the word ANSCO. So ANSCO stands for ANSCO, and then you type in the accountant occupation. Right now, ANSCO, and then you scroll down and you find the website that says abs.gov.au. Okay, why? Because ABS is the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which I also do work for in my public service career. So Australian Bureau of Statistics is the basis of what the Department of Immigration is using, right, for occupation. So the ANSCO is the Australian and New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations. And this thing says, if your occupation is an accountant, then you should be able to do these tasks, okay?
Yep.
And it's likely that your occupation name is one of these ones. But this is also where you find if it's a major group 1 or major group 2. Okay, so I'll repeat that. It says, if you're nominating an ANSCO major occupation group 1 or group 2, you must have proficient English. Where do you find this? You find your occupation, you type it into ANSCO, and you look up here.
Oh, major group 2 professional. Oh, okay, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So major group 2 means you need IELTS of 7, irrespective of if you got your skills assessment or not.
So some people who only got 6 in each and they got the professional year, that still doesn't count, isn't it? They still need to have 7 in each. Tricky.
Tricky, yes. And this is why some agents don't understand this, but I guess because I used to work in government space, I always go back to the government website, right? Irrespective of what the agent says, always triple check it. Why? Because if it changes, you at least have a source of information to go to.
Yes.
So yes, so you're right. People who don't have, but also when they don't have the English of 10, they might have their professional year, but they might not get their 60 points either. Right?
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
Could be. So it's a combination of working out, 1, do you have the points? B, but the safest bet is always try and get English to IELTS 7 if you can. Okay, so I'll give you a good contrast. So I had a client the other day. He was an architect. Okay, so if we type in ANSCO architect, and so don't get confused with anything seek visa, immigration.com, go back to abs.gov.au, right? So we go back to ANSCO. So if you're looking up here, it says major group 2.
Yes.
Okay, so as an architect, you would need IELTS 7, but you may not need it for your skills assessment. Okay, now some people, so then this is other thing, if you're a drafts person, ANSCO drafts person, here, okay, this one's a grade group 3, so you don't need IELTS 7. Okay, so that's just the trick for some of your clients. Go back to ANSCO, check is it major group 2 or 1 or 3 first, and then come to Canberra for 3 months, because some people come and then they're like, oh, I didn't know I had to,
I wish I have.
Yeah. Okay, so we keep going on. So that's where you find your ANSCO major groups. You go back to the ANSCO page, type in your occupation. The other thing to consider is, like you mentioned, some of your clients come here and they have family.
Yeah.
Right? Now, your family members also have to come and live here for 3 months.
So it's not like one person live in New South Wales, the other guy live in ACT. They got to be together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if they see that you're not in any of your documentation, then there is a chance that you will be refused.
Yes.
Okay, so,
these are very popular questions, really, that I have. is that, you know, how people say if they go to regional areas, they might not find jobs. So at least one member of the family have to live in the big cities to get the income for the other member to be in the regional areas. But based on this, apparently both of them have to be in the regional area.
Yeah, so practically, it's probably not feasible for everyone to move across from a financial perspective, from leaving a house, from leaving their education, right? So in this case, I would advise at least have 6 months to a year on your visa before you move. Okay, because that way one person can come out here first, suss out the jobs, look for job interviews, get the job, then move, right? So that would be my advice. Find the job first, because at least then you have a secure income, right, to support your family. I mean, the reason you would move is to find a better job for your family. So it sounds a little silly to move first without a job and you've got 2 kids and a wife, right? Or the vice versa. But some people are, like I mentioned, they are financially supported by other family members, so they may not need the job to begin with. But this case-by-case scenario. So that's just something to keep an eye out for. Another strategy per se is that, you know, if you were to keep both accommodations, if you can afford to, then that might be an option too. Because, you know, for example, I travel a lot. I might live in different places at different times. So it's okay to have 2 residential addresses if you're still going to go from one to the other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Okay. Yeah. So that's just a practical strategy, but, you know, we've got to talk in detail to each case by case. Okay, so then, okay, this is the other dot point she clarified. Now, if your partner is your wife and you have a marriage certificate, it's okay. If you just live together for ACT nomination, it's not okay. Okay, so for de facto, it's not okay. For ACT nomination, for de facto on a partner visa, you live together 12 months, it's okay. Okay, and I'll repeat what that means. It means if you have a partner, so you're not married, but you've lived together for 12 months.
Like boyfriend, girlfriend, for example.
Boyfriend, girlfriend, for example, it's not enough just to say you live together. They actually want you to show a civil partnership or registration, which means at some point you've decided that you are serious and you're committed to each other and that you are going to register a civil partnership. So you can do that in New South Wales, in Victoria, and ACT, anywhere. Okay, so that's key, okay, because I have seen some refuse because they don't accept just living together. And the reason that is because they say, well, prove to me that you're not just housemates. Right? Because we have lots of students that share a house. So prove to me that you're not just housemates. Okay. Or Vivo, secondary applicant status for yourself or a partner. What this means is if you had come here on a student visa and your spouse or dependent, you got married overseas, and she or he came across as a subsequent temporary entrant or independent, they will accept that. But if you're a student and you came out here to study bachelor's and you lived in one house and then you happen to meet your boyfriend who also moved here on another student visa in a different and lived in the same house, they will not accept that.
Okay, fair point.
Right? So, and the proviso is prove to me that you're just not housemates.
Yeah.
That
So
sleep together.
even you provide like photos together, Facebook photos together, it's still not enough, isn't it?
No, not for them. So they're very specific. If you're claiming matrix points, you must provide marriage certificate if you're a wife. Okay. Now, civil relationship if you are de facto. So note to future listeners, if you're serious about your other half, then organize a civil partnership. Right? Especially only for ACT. Not only, but currently for ACT, I can explain that. Now, you must declare the relationship is genuine. Yeah, so that's one thing. And then you have to sign a stat dec committing to live and work in Canberra for at least 2 years. What this means is they want people to actually stay here and live for 2 years instead of coming here, getting the PR and then leaving.
So do you mean that I see they will not release the people to go to other cities once
They
they
will release. I
yeah.
have had some clients release to go to other cities, but you would have to show why. Is it really that you couldn't find a job? And because our unemployment rates are about 2%, they're going to say, I don't think so. Or you chose a really, really difficult occupation, right? But case by case basis. So usual basis is, can you really not find a job here? And can you really not find something in your occupation?
Okay.
Prove that you've been searching long and hard, and then maybe we will release you. Yeah. So as an example of someone that did get their release letter signed, his background was journalism, and it was very hard for him to get a job here. But he could find jobs like in retail, at a phone store, a convenience store, but it wasn't related to his occupation. And so he searched for probably 6 months to a year, and then he applied for a release letter, and then he was able to get, right? So that's an example. Which is also why, going back to the point of can't here, find a job first, because if you do find a job, then it's also least likely that you're going to leave, right? Because the whole reason most people leave or move to another city is because they can't find a job, right? And they need to survive. Yes. Okay, so
have you seen a lot of cases where people from Sydney or Melbourne and they apply jobs in ACT and they get the jobs
yes.
before they even go to ACT themselves?
Do I see a lot?
Or must
To
they
be
go
honest,
there first and then look for the jobs there and then get the jobs?
yeah, at least come visit, understand the environment. Canberra's not that big, right? So if we look at the size here compared to Sydney, you could spend one day and you understand the environment. So sometimes the government is like, don't tell me that you tried really hard because we're not that big. And you couldn't find a job because you spent half a day. No, you need to at least, yeah. So same thing, when you choose to move to Melbourne or move to Sydney, you might not have a job, but you go and look for it. Whereas Canberra, the size is not that big. So I would recommend people take that time, especially if they are considering ACT as a longer term,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And so while we still on that point, so I think what you mentioned so far is there's a lot of jobs in constructions. There's a lot of jobs in trades.
Yes.
How about for professional jobs like IT, accounting, engineer? Are there good numbers of jobs in those industry?
So unfortunately, the white collar jobs or the office jobs, accounting, professional, the large number of clientele or businesses in Canberra is government. And because government, they have a higher security requirement, they really prefer permanent residences or citizens to get the jobs. Okay, so I'd say 50% of jobs are government, the other 50% are smaller. So this is also why the ACT nomination, if you look at it, they don't say you have to work in your field. You don't.
No, they don't say
You
that.
can be an accountant and maybe work in construction. I know it's not ideal, but there's many people that study one thing and work as a cafe waiter, or work in hospitality, right? Just to get by. So let's go back down to the points. So I won't talk about overseas unless you really want me to. No,
that's fine.
Yeah. So just note here, right? You are not eligible for ACT nomination if you, your spouse, or children are living or working in another Australian state or territory. So just keep this in mind, because if you apply and any of your documents show that you were living there in New South Wales, you may not receive a nomination.
And this actually is very similar to Tasmania as well, because in Tasmania we have seen cases where they got refused with the nomination because of that reason. One spouse is here, the other spouse is in Sydney, and they got the refusal as well. So very, very similar.
I've had a business client where his son was living in Melbourne, but he wanted to invest into Perth, and that got refused because they're like, your son's studying in Melbourne. Okay, so all these things, what I'm highlighting is just be very conscious of where your family is. So a way to minimize it or reduce it is, for ACT especially, one person come out here, find the job, make sure it's a good environment, then move the family. Okay, otherwise you just, you'd be playing with a complication. I mean, it's okay. It's just Keep it simple for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go into the Canberra Matrix points. So the point system is actually heavily designed for someone who's already studying here, living here, and working here. Okay, it's heavily tailored to that person. So it's not actually designed for people who are coming down from Sydney or across from Melbourne.
Gotcha. Oh,
Okay,
okay, okay, okay.
and you'll see this in the matrix points. Why? First one, ACT residence. The longer you live here, the more points you get. So for anyone who's just moved down from Sydney, moved across from Melbourne, and they say, oh yeah, I got 3 months, then they actually get 0 points. They're eligible, but they get 0 points.
Yeah.
Okay, so that reduces your ability to be invited. Okay, then the next, English proficiency. At most occupations you will need proficient 10. That's good. Okay, so then if you have the spouse or the partner, make sure you have the civil relationship, civil registration, or you're in a marriage, or they're dependent on your Vivo. Okay, then they could give you some points. Now, nominated occupation. This is where the entire occupation list you can nominate, but if they're open, obviously you get the 20 points.
So much different, isn't it, in the open and closed list, the occupation? They give so much different points.
Very much different, yes. So it's just to entice people to come on the open list. So noting what I mentioned before, what areas or that I foresee jobs are going to stay for PR. I mentioned construction. So we saw that on page, where was it? This is page 6 of the occupation list, right? All
Yes.
this tradie.
Yeah.
I also mentioned medical. Why? Because you look up here, all these nurses.
Wow.
Okay, registered nurses, they're open. You have midwives, nurse manager, speech. So something in the
Also,
medical field.
is social worker open as well? So because there are quite a few people interested in
I
social
think
work.
social worker is open. Yes, the
Oh, okay.
challenge is your skills assessment. Okay,
Mm.
so social worker, I believe, is let me just find it. I think it's TRA. But let me show you. So also the Department of Home Affairs actually has updated their website fairly regularly, which is, oh, sorry, let me go back. Fairly regularly now. So, I mean, that's a bonus. And that's only because they're transitioning more into electronic, applications. Okay, so social worker. So social worker is on the medium to long-term list. Okay, so you need the assessment through this one. I think the challenge here is the English. You need the skills assessment through AASW, which is the Australian Association of Social Workers. So you have to go in there and find out what you need to get your skills assessment. So that'll be the challenge. Okay, so going back to, occupation list. So you mentioned I mentioned medical. And then the third thing I mentioned was like aged care. And reason I said aged care was probably easier to get a job, even though it's harder to study. Right. But yeah, so keep an eye on what the occupation list will change in the next 1, 2, and 3 years. Okay, going back to the matrix. So we've got the nominated occupation. Now, length of time in ACT employment. So I mentioned before, it's geared towards people who are studying, living, and working here already. So, right. So because if you are studying here, it's likely that you have a part-time job here, then you get more points here. Right. But if you just move down for 3 months, yes, you're eligible. No, you don't get any points on the residence, and no, you don't get any points on your employment. Can you see that? Can you understand that? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And now the skill level. This is only if you are working in your open occupation. Like you mentioned, it's a little bit hard to find a job in your profession. So ACT says you don't need to. If you are working in an ANSCO skill level 1 to 3 occupation, you get 5 points. Now, how do you know what's ANSCO skill level 1 to 3? You go back to that ANSCO list, right? Google ANSCO, type an occupation. Now, I'll show you something in terms of, actually on my website, I asked my IT guy to create an ANSCO skill list on my website, so it was helpful for clients, because then they could just go back and do a drop down. But I'll try and find it without remembering where it is. Oh yeah, okay, cool. ANSCO occupation lists. So I created a specific, so it's derived from the overall ANSCO website. Okay, but this one is like, if you look at skill level 1, these are really your white collar occupations. And then if you look at skill level 3, these are maybe something you could get a job in that could also help you get 5 points. Right. So these, if you can see it, they're still very heavily trade driven. Metal fabricator, fitters, gunsman, locksmith, toolmaker, carpenter, joiner, glazier. So this is where I said maybe you're working in accounting or working in a high profession, but you will be able to get a job in a lower level.
So
Okay.
maybe someone on a 485 visa, they can even consider doing a short course of trade courses, isn't it? To just to make themselves with the right skills.
100%, yes. So leverage your 2 years that you get on your 485 to 1, try and find your skills assessment, and 2, maybe have a backup plan in trade. Maybe.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what else? If you're, yeah, so this one is also just something to keep an eye out for. Most people don't get any points here, right? Unless they were originally sponsored on a working visa. But that also means you would have had to live and work in ACT, right? So for anyone that's thinking of moving down, thinking of moving across, just keep in mind this, because it's not as easy as it seems. And make sure you have enough time on your visa, on your 485 visa or on another visa to tie you over this length of time.
You see, because the thing is, it seems like people only start to take actions when the visa is about to run out of time. And
yes, I know.
yeah.
See that all the time. I was like, okay, you're coming to see me because your visa expires in 3 weeks. What do you want me to do about it? Come up with some magic. Sometimes I can't.
That's right. God.
Sometimes, you know. So information is key, right? So the fact that you're doing a podcast, I commend you on that. You know, you should share this information, because once they know it, they can make an informed decision.
Yeah, of course. And there's a lot of mixed information out there, you know. One person say this, the other person say that, and they're very confused. And to hear the one from a source like you is very good for them.
Yeah. So, I mean, the key source of information that's not going to be wrong is the department's website, right? Or any of the government websites. Unlikely, not that it can't be wrong, but it's unlikely. And information can be misconstrued depending on how much knowledge the agent themselves have. But I guess because I grew up and live here in ACT, I can tell you for a fact that I will share a lot more information than maybe a Sydney agent or a Melbourne agent, because they don't really understand Canberra as an economy. And like I mentioned to you before, the business manager or the skilled migration manager, Julianne, she's also a registered migration agent. So she knows when an agent is trying to be a little bit different or, yes, difficult. So just keep an eye. Like, it's not to say it hasn't been done. It's just be wary of that. That's why ACT is a little bit harder to get nominations through. Okay, so spouse or partner, again, make sure you're married, got the civil registration. Even if you have a child, actually, can I make that point? Even if you have had a baby and you're living together for 12 months, they will refuse you. I've had a client that has been refused on that basis. Because they want that piece of paper to say that you are not just a housemate, and okay, you're not just their baby daddy or their baby mama.
Accidentally, yeah.
Okay, and that's the honest truth. So make sure you have your documentation. Okay, so tertiary qualification. Now here is a bit lenient. So if you studied in Australia or an international institution, you can get points. Master's degree 15, bachelor's 10, diploma 2 years, 5 points. Okay, so that's good. Most people have that. And then years of study. Now look at this section. It's years of study at an ACT institution. So if you studied here and you lived here, you're likely to get this point, right? But if you studied in Sydney, studied in Melbourne, studied in Hobart, Darwin, anywhere else, and came here, it will be 0. With an exception of professional year. So if you came here to study the professional year during your 485, that can be 5 points.
Wow, that's very generous of them to give 5 points for PY. You know? Very generous.
Oh, I guess so.
Wow.
But however, remember, your professional year is only for 3 occupations: accounting, IT, and engineering. So it's more than likely that these professions will be coming to Canberra because they cannot be invited via 189 in other cities. Okay, so keep an eye out for that. And then the second last one is assets in Canberra. If you buy a property, you get 5 points. If you also purchased or established a business, then 5 points. If you did a startup, then 5 points. So sometimes I advise certain clients who potentially are financially stable or they have a lot of support at home, is they could look at buying a business anyway in Canberra. 1, it'll help create jobs in the economy. 2, they could get their 5 points. And see if the business itself is, let's say, an IT company and they're in an IT profession, they will be able to issue themselves an employment contract with the business.
Wow. But of course,
Okay.
it's only for people who has good finance, strong finance to do that.
Correct. Yeah.
It's not for everyone, but it's worth considering. Yeah.
It's worth considering it. So as I mentioned, my specialization is in business migration. So I do have a number of clients who have that capability, and then they have chosen to undertake these options. Right. Nice. So keep that in mind. And then close family ties. So if you have family that reside here, then you get the 20 or the 10 points. Right. So if you can see, just based on this, if you had just moved down for 3 months, then points-wise, 0. Okay, so maybe you have proficient English, so 10 points. Okay, maybe you have a partner, 15. Okay, now your occupation, accounting, not on the list, so 0. You haven't worked here, so you've only got 15 points so far. You're working here, okay, still not, right? No points. Then your spouse might be working, so at max maybe another 5 to 10 points, so that's 25 points.
Yeah.
You do have a master's per se, because you did master of professional accounting, so maybe so 25, so that would be 40 points. 40. Okay, 40 points. And then you didn't study in ACT because you studied elsewhere, so you're still on 40 points. And maybe you're really lucky and you have a sister that lives here, so 40, that's 50 points. Okay, so points wise, you're still on the list, but remember, on terms of nomination, they are only inviting people, let me find that page again, around 70 points or more.
Yeah. Wow.
Lost the list. Let me find. So once I think some clients understand that, then the only thing they can do is come here earlier with their visa. If you come here with 3 months on your visa, it can't magically make you be here for 3 years, right? Or 2 years. Yeah. So nomination guide. Oh, let me go back to nomination matrix. So right now they're inviting people around 70 to 120 points.
So that means a minimum of 65 points, yeah? So 65 plus 5, is it?
No. So just to get that 5, you need 70 points or more on the matrix.
Oh, gotcha. So, okay. So you must start with 70 points minimum. You must start with 70.
For a high chance of being invited, yes.
Yeah. Wow.
So some of my clients who have now understand the complexity, but we try and keep it simple. We're saying, okay, how much time do you have left? Because if you have you just moved down and you're on your 485, well, that's great, because you can look for a job that's got higher points, okay? Or 2, you'll at least have 2 years of residence by the time you apply.
Yeah, because a lot of my clients, the two main types. One is those who already graduated and holding 485. The other
Yes.
one is about to graduate and they're about to apply for 485. So
Great.
do you always advise people to apply for 485 right away, or sometimes they should keep that 485 for now and go study something else first in Canberra and then apply for 485 later on?
That's a good question. If they have the capability and the funds to study, then definitely, because once they move here and they have the 2 year, the study, you'll get more points, right?
Mm.
Because there is how many years of study at an ACT education. So that does guarantee them if they can come here, study first, but it would have to be above, like bachelor, masters, so it would have to be plus plus. So in those circumstances, to me, they would have to be families that can afford the 40 to 80 grand master's course. Right? Let's be honest. Because if you want to study, sure.
Show me the money.
Yeah, everyone has a price, unfortunately.
Yes.
So, including the government, including the government.
Of course.
So should they save that 485? Like you mentioned, yes, it's a once off, so they should save it if they can.
Mm.
The other thing you could do is if they are in partnership, one studying and the other's not, one could go back onto studies, okay? The other become a dependent,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And then you can still buy yourself some time. So in essence, what we're really talking about is, can we extend our time here to make the matrix points? For someone who's moving down from Sydney or Melbourne, you can. It's not impossible. Also, the reason I say go back and find a job is if we go to my overview page, right? So I always use this one pager now.
Mm.
Is remember, you can study, go back and pay an institution, study something else, maybe a bit more high level, then apply for your 485. And if you still cannot do something, but you have a job here, maybe your employer will sponsor you. Okay. So
Yeah.
you still have that option. Um,
Mm.
and you touched on the wages of whether employers can afford $53,000 or $54,000 a year, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's some.
Yeah. So the benefit of being in Canberra is Canberra's got a high income originally. So all our employers here are used to paying people. Make sense? So they're used to an hourly rate anywhere from $20 to $30 an hour. People in construction are getting paid $40 to $50 an hour.
Mm.
Okay. So is it possible? Yes. And that's something another part of my business will start focusing on, because we can see that jobs is one of the key criteria, is that we're starting to connect with reputable and qualified employers that need workers, right? So we're starting to build that list. And then what we're going to say is, okay, you guys need these people. How about we put forward this list of clients that we know
Yes.
are really good. They can do their job and they're willing to work for you. Are you willing to accept them? So we're going to try and connect them, and at the same time solve the visa issue. So we're going to try and do two birds with one stone, but it is a slower process, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very good idea you having that idea. Yeah. And also one
Yeah.
more thing, like
Mhm.
is because I don't know why is it that it seems like ICT do not give up 489 and or 491. Is it they only give 190?
Yeah. So 4-8. Okay. The other thing I built on my website was I was like, I need a map because I'm a very visual person. So I created a one pager, created little pictures. I also created nomination by states, which meant I was like, all right, I need to know the big picture. If in ACT, what can you apply for? Okay, so this is also on my website. You can click on it. Now you're right. For TR, they only do now 489 ACT. This is the thing I want to share with you. As a family living in the ACT, you can do 489, but the state will not sponsor you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, gotcha.
Okay, so something to consider longer term. Let's say you got your permanent residence in ACT and you enjoyed ACT, you loved it, and you live here, you've built a family here, and you have a brother that is in overseas or a sister. You can still sponsor them on a 489. but the state government itself doesn't issue invitations. But as a person who lives in the ACT, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that means with the 491 coming up, it would not really impact ACT as much because 491 is more for a state sponsorship, regional state sponsorship, isn't it? So it's not going to impact you guys
Correct.
as much.
Yes. Yes.
Because one of the concern is what I just said to you before as well, is the 53,900, is that a lot
Yes.
of people are concerned that amount of money when they go to whether it's Tasmania or South Australia, they're afraid that they can't find a job that pays them
Yes.
that much amount of money.
Yeah.
And so that is where they are sitting on the fence right now. Should they go regional or should they give up their Australia dream and go home?
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, I 100% agree, and I understand their concerns. So if we look at the map, I mean, this is a good example. So very visual, right? I need a map. So New South Wales, large population. Victoria, very large population. Tasmania, you can tell me, you were just in Hobart. What's the population in Tasmania?
We are 500,000 now.
Oh, really? So it's actually more than ACT.
Yeah, it's like
You're more than ACT, but you cover a lot more landmass.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
At the
So
moment,
ACT is very
Hobart and Launceston are the two major cities in
yes,
Tasmania. Hobart and
yes,
Launceston. Mm.
correct. And so the jobs there are also dependent on the type of job, right? So going back to the first question, what's available in ACT? I know for fact construction jobs are out here, hospitality jobs are here. Some of the white collar stuff is not that easy to find, not impossible, but those are some of the considerations you'll have to consider. And then what is it? Northern Territory. Now, Northern Territory, they do have a pretty lucrative 190, but you have to live there for 6 months and work in a place for 6 months.
And in the relevant occupation.
And in a relevant occupation, correct. You're right. So whereas ACT, although they have a very complicated point system, they're just saying, if you live here longer and you study here longer, you can't find a job, that's okay. Right? So way up. So I guess the what I can summarize is if you do come to ACT, at least you won't not find a job. But whether it's the job that you is related to your what you studied, can't guarantee, but it's not a requirement in ACT.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
That's a. And do you expect ACT to increase the invitation points? Because it's like it's already increased, yeah. Now you say it's 70 points now minimum. So is
for
it
the
going to
matrix,
increase
yeah.
more? Yeah, is it going to increase more in the future? Are you expecting that?
I don't really think so, only because if we look at just a numbers game, right? My background's accounting. Let's have a look. If you had someone that studied here 3 years, right? So you would have 10 points here as a residence. You might have 20 in proficient, so that's 10, 20. So we're just considering single, not with a partner. 10, 20. And then you was closed, so that's still 20 points. But you had worked here, so that's 30 points. You're already halfway. And your skill level, probably not there, that's 0. So it's still 30 points. Now you had a qualification, so if you studied something, so at least bachelor's, so that's 10, so that's 40 points.
40, yep.
And then you studied 3 years here, that's 15, so that's 55. And then 55 points plus an asset, if they did buy a house here, that's 60, right? So they're still short 10 points, even if they studied here for 3 years. So is it likely that they're going to increase it? It's unlikely. Okay, that's the short answer.
It's already very high in the beginning, right?
It's already set at a high standard, correct?
High expectation.
Yeah, and yeah, so that is really all I could share with you. Now, in terms of the 494, right, so we spoke about the 190, that's for permanent residents. So with the 494, the key, why I mentioned jobs, just drill it into your listeners, is occupation list is driven by job. I'm trying to, I've opened too many screens, but I will find the, yeah, okay. So skilled regional, Okay. Yes, you need to be approved sponsor. Your employer needs to be an approved business sponsor before they can sponsor you on a 494.
Mm.
Okay. And that's why I suggest you come here first, find a job, talk to your employer. Canberra is very much a networking city. It's like 2 degrees of separation. You know one person, you know the next person.
Mm.
Right. So if you're a good employee, you work hard, you have great attitude, and you're really dedicated, it's likely if your current employer or the first job that you find and they can't do anything, they'll know somebody that may.
Mm. Yes, gotcha.
Yes.
Mm.
So this is also leveraging your ability to network, your social skills.
I understand this very well because this is personal experience. All these things.
Yeah. And what some people say to me, that's a life skill. So don't blame the government for making it hard. It's a life skill that you need to go talk to people. No one's going to hand it to you on a platter, right?
No.
Yeah.
Right. So I think today you answered so many worried questions about ICT.
I'll stop share for now.
I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. So let's just do a bit of so I will do a bit of a summary and tell me if I miss out any points. So
Sure.
what we discussed today is in terms of the occupation wise, it sounds like ICT has a good number of employment going on right there. It's not like a typical regional area where people
Yes.
struggle when there's no jobs going on. And you
Yes.
also mentioned that occupation within the medical fields, as well as within the construction field, is going to be around for a while, and it's quite easy to find jobs within those fields. So this could be some courses that they could consider studying um, to have good employment prospects. And we went through a big part of our conversation today was about the matrix, and
Mm.
it was quite complicated, but actually I think it's quite easy to understand now. Um, in a nutshell, it just means that the people who work, live, and study there have more priorities. So that means
Correct.
the more commitment you show to the ICT sets, the more points you get, and the more likely you get your invitation. And
Correct. Yes.
you say that it's always better for them to come there earlier rather than sooner. But again,
Mm.
is is not always the case. People try to delay and postpone until the last minute,
Yes.
and also in terms of the payment rates, it's
Yes.
ICT pays quite well compared to other regional areas, so which is a very good thing. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what we discussed. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll just clarify I'll just share my screen because I found the unemployment rate. I think I mentioned 2%, but that was not correct. So can you see my screen?
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, I used to work in government, so I always go back to government websites. So this is from the treasury.act.gov.au. So it's the Treasury Department of State Government, the Australian Capital Territory Government. So as at August, which was 2 months ago, the unemployment rate was 3.5%.
Mm.
Okay, so it is lower in consideration to the rest of the cities. I was just Googling the average wage. So I literally typed average pay in ACT. So if you look at that, the average Canberra wage is 85,000. Right. So if you Google that for New South Wales, it's probably around 50
Try
or
to put
60.
Tasmania. Put Tasmania there. Let's see what it say.
For Tasmania. I don't know. I'm scared.
You know what I mean?
I know. Average pay in Tasmania, 55.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yes. So, I 100% would agree with you why people from Tasmania would or be hesitant to move to Tasmania, because your average wage is 55, which means people pay less, right? A lot less, or some higher. So that is the stark difference. I mean, one of the reasons why the Canberra wage is so high is because of government, but that also correlates into smaller businesses,
So you
right?
say
So
about 50%, 50-50 ratio, right? 50 government and 50 private, no?
correct, right?
Roughly. Yeah.
So So private enterprises understand that, so they will pay that regardless, you know. But that also means competition, right? So I'll just stop share so we can have a debate about it. It also means, all right, if I'm an employer and I need to choose one person to manage a restaurant or one person to work in as my IT staff, I'm going to choose the best one, right? So then there's a little bit of competition involved in finding that one job. But that's a normal thing, right? Finding jobs is normal, regardless of whether you have a visa or not. You know, you have a PR now, let's say you have visas now, and some people have visas and they don't have a job. And that's
Which
the
is
worst
quite common.
situation.
I see quite good numbers of them, like people like that, very often. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's a different challenge. It's more of, okay, how can I get a paid job? That's a different skill set. That's no longer about whether you live or work in ACT. That's about, do you have the abilities and capabilities and skills and attributes to deliver your tasks?
Yes,
Right?
yes. Which is something
And
that unfortunately I don't think schools teach you a lot. It's really you picked up as you go and you learned it as you go.
yes, you learn as you go and you learn through the environment. So even though ACT, it's not like someone hands you a job, but you go ask, you network, you build the relationships. Good for some people who are extroverts like myself, not so good for introverts. So each to their own, right? But yeah, is there
Great, but
anything else I can share with you
yeah, I
today?
think that's really good, Lee. So appreciate your time today. And if my clients want to use your service, how can they access you? How can they contact you?
Yeah, so because my intention is to provide as much information on their first consultation so they can go away and make an informed decision, I always charge for my time. On some cases, I don't, just depending on the complexity, and if it's an urgent case, then we'll figure it out. But for you, Leo, I think what we'll offer is a dollar rate discount. So we'll offer you $30 off a consultation rate directly with me and one of my staff members. So there'll be two of me, technically, right? And the reason that is because most of my time is handled through other business clients. So if you can't find me, you'll still have a staff member of mine. So you'll still feel supported all the way through. Okay, so so I'll offer $30 off, and I can post the coupon code. You can jump on the website and make a booking that way. But if you have any questions in the meantime, there's a live chat button as well. You can chat to us, ask any questions in particular. But if it's anything personalized, it's best to have that one-on-one consultation. So the intention is to give you a lot of information, so you go away going, okay, I know what I'm doing, instead of, I don't really know if he said the right thing or she said the right thing.
Yeah.
That's our intention.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you for that offer. So guys, if you're interested in using her service, which is I do recommend. I know Liz for I think 3 years now, Liz, about 3 years, 2.5.
Yeah, even when you had your complicated issue.
She's been amazing. I really enjoy working with her. So if you guys interested in using her service, you can either contact me or contacting her directly. We can figure that out easily. But again, thank you for your time, Liz, and
You're welcome. Thank you. And I hope everyone got some, information or found it beneficial. So.
It is very beneficial. And